scale, and it lowers initial capex hurdles without compromising long-term affordability. Another risk that is always highlighted with new technologies is the perceived technology risk, because the technology is not well known. The mitigant for that, of course, becomes blended capital structures with first loss facilities.
The Infrastructure Fund says blended finance will play a central role in scaling up IBT implementation across the country. Dr. Misaveni Ngobeni is the Managing Director of the Infrastructure Fund.
Suffice to indicate that the IF is a blended finance platform ready to do business. We want to partner with the department to be able to ensure that the IBT intervention works better. The Infrastructure Fund is open for business, and we are willing to support the sector to reach its intended objectives.
Day 2 discussions highlight that while innovation is critical, funding structures, risk mitigation, and collaboration between government and financiers will determine whether IBTs are implemented at scale. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Coming up in just a short while, we'll be speaking about the Decide platform Mozambique. They have gone into partnership with the Mediation Center in Africa to convene a high-level meeting. A roundtable discussion has taken place. It's been titled Human Security, Community Resilience and the Challenges of Conflict Expansion in Northern Mozambique. It happened at the University of Pretoria. We'll be finding out about how that went and the deliberations from there when it comes to security in Mozambique.
6 decades of rhythm, resonance, and relevance. We are Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi has now accused Rwanda of violating the peace deal. Are you surprised at this latest accusation? This is literally days after a signing, a ceremony, so to speak.
This is not surprising. I mean, if you ask Paul Kagame, he would also say almost the same thing. One should ask a question. The broker of the peace deal, President Trump, what is it that he wants? Why now? And why is this peace deal being signed in the Americas and not in the Great Lakes? Paul Kagame has never respected Tshisekedi, as often say. Tshisekedi must deal with the problems in his country. He has nothing to do with it. So this peace deal, obviously, when it was signed, one just looked at it and said, this will not last.
Kenny Matiba, former journalist.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
The Decide platform Mozambique, in partnership with the Mediation Center in Africa, convened a high-level roundtable discussion titled Human Security, Community Resilience and the Challenges of Conflict Expansion in Northern Mozambique on Wednesday at the University of Pretoria, bringing together a select group of experts, academics and civil society actors in a closed and reflective setting. The discussions focused on recent developments in security across Cabo Delgado, Mampula and Niassa provinces, examining the humanitarian and socio-economic impacts on affected communities, among other things. To help us unpack the outcomes of this meeting, we're joined by Decide Platform Mozambique Director Wilka Diaz. Wilka, good morning to you and thanks for making time to talk to us. Wilka, good morning. Welcome to Rise and Shine. Right, we're going to try and dial up Wilka Diaz again, who is Decide Platform Mozambique Director, to talk about that high-level roundtable discussion that took place yesterday at the University of Pretoria.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are. With our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa's just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
All right, let's go back to that story about the Decide platform Mozambique, and they, in partnership with the Mediation Center in Africa, have convened a high-level roundtable discussion. We speak to Decide platform Mozambique Director Wilka Diaz. Wilka, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invite.
It's our pleasure. So, reflecting on the roundtable discussions that took place at the University of Pretoria, how would you assess the overall quality and depth of those discussions, and what stood out the most for you?
I think it was very useful, an important debate. We discussed about the situation in north of Mozambique because the most part of the time we only pay attention what's happening in the other countries on our continent, like in Sudan and etc. But we don't pay attention what's really happened or discuss what really happened in the north of Mozambique. This is created very big impact in our SADC region. So that is the reason we make that meeting to try to have some peaceful solutions for Cabo Delgado at this moment. And one other important thing, we understand the academy or the universities, the one of the first place we can find some scientific solutions with some other specialists at this moment. So that is the reason we start that conversation in the university in Pretoria with CMA and the other specialists to try to find some solutions, humanitarian solutions, but in the other side, the military solutions, because we think the Cabo Delgado, Niassa, Nampula conflict in the north of Mozambique affected all the region in particular.
So based on those exchanges that took place amongst experts, how dire is the situation currently in Cabo Delgado, Nampula and Niassa provinces? I mean, it's one thing to hear of reports from journalists, but when the experts get together and practitioners, we might get a different angle there, particularly with regard to the risk of further conflict.
No, so the most part of the specialists said the conflict is one very big risk for our regions. So we need to try to fight together. We need to activate the solidarity to try to fight against the terrorism. One of the things Paddy said, it's very important to make some investments in the different sector, like the technological sector. It's the one very important to try to fight against that. It's very important, and the other side to find ways to have the community involved in this conflict. When I said community involved with this conflict, is to find one way to live peaceful with the leaders in the communities, to give some contributions, to find ways with dialogue or in the other ways in the military sector. So it's the one of those things we need to provide the best conditions to that people. And one important thing the specialists talking about during this debate, it's the most part of the attacks in Nampula, for example, in Cabo Delgado, on these last 6 months, it's on the mineral areas. We have a lot of things, a lot of natural resources, and it's very important for the economic sector, for the terrorism group. So we need to make some deep study at this moment to try to find some other solution. But at the last moment, without any solutions or any security solutions, not the safe areas. So it's very important to provide these things. If you go to inside of the communities and try to talk with some leaders, you will see the answer. when you ask, for example, what we can do to find a peace in Cabo Delgado, Nampula, the person said, we need food first. After food, we can discuss about the solutions and we can discuss about the dialogue at this moment. So we have that type of comments we write during this whole process, and we will try to discuss in the other opportunities.
So as you talk of other opportunities then, from Decide's perspective, how do you plan to translate the outcomes of this high-level dialogue into practical action or engagement, especially with those communities on the ground at the national and regional levels, so that this doesn't end as a talk shop?
Yes, one of the things Decide plans to do is to continue to work on the ground to provide the social help to the people in the Cabo Delgado in particular. But we will continue to work on the advocacy, international advocacy, to try to find a solutions or create some more pressure to the regional solution for this conflict in Cabo Delgado. Because if you see on the last years, we saw the record of the attacks in Cabo Delgado, more than 600 attacks in Cabo Delgado, in Nampula, and Niassa. So it's a record of attacks, and we have a lot of displaced people, we have a lot of dead people. So that is the reason we will continue to work on this subject, to provide humanitarian assistance, to provide or to give conditions or the human rights, to save the human rights conditions. And in the other side, we need to run to have solutions, peaceful solutions or military solutions. At this moment, we think that is the most important, and that is the reason we also open the one office in Johannesburg to try to approach the other leaders at this moment in the other organizations or university like University of Pretoria and CMA.
Wilka, thank you so much for your time. We'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Wilka Diaz is Decide Platform Mozambique's director, joining us to tell us about that partnership with the Mediation Center in Africa between Decide Platform Mozambique and them. They convened a high-level gathering, a roundtable discussion more specifically, tackling the challenges of conflict expansion in northern Mozambique, focusing on the provinces of Cabo Delgado, Nampula and Niassa, and looking at the humanitarian and socio-economic impacts on affected communities, among other things.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
You're listening to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine every weekday between 6 and 9 Central African Time. Stay with us as we go into the second hour of the program, and your presenters, as always, Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda. But we begin the second hour with the news as we say good morning to Joalane Tulo Mwepe. It's 7 o'clock.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Morocco has urged residents of flood-prone areas in the country's northwestern plains to leave immediately amid rising threats of inundation from heavy rain, swollen rivers and the release of water from full dams. 37 people have died and more than 100,000 have been evacuated from 4 provinces after flash floods swept several areas. Eswatini's High Court has thrown out a case filed by human rights lawyers and activists that challenge the government's deal with the United States to accept third country deportees. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has sent at least 15 third country deportees to Eswatini since last July as part of its crackdown on illegal immigration. The small southern African country received $5.1 million as part of the deal. The applicants in the case, led by the Eswatini Litigation Center, claimed that the agreement was unconstitutional because it was not submitted to Parliament for approval and the terms were not disclosed. South Africa's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola has lambasted those criticizing action taken against the Israeli Deputy Ambassador to South Africa, Ariel Seidman. Lamola says his department had a number of engagements last year with Seidman to try and express its views on the constant attacks that he directed at President Cyril Ramaphosa and the government. He also indicated that Pretoria will not drop its International Court of Justice case against Israel.
We have not taken the decision lightly. It was after repeated misconduct by the charge d'affaires of the Israel embassy, who was called to DERCO many times last year as a demarche to call the diplomat to order to behave in a manner that the guests and diplomats are supposed to behave through the protocols and the Vienna Convention, how it guides us.
The Economic Freedom Fighters Party in South Africa has urged voters to punish the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance parties in the upcoming local government elections for what it calls failure to deliver basic services. Speaking to the media at the party's headquarters in Johannesburg, party leader Julius Malema relayed what came out of the party's second plenum held over the weekend. He cited ongoing water shortages in Midrand in the north of Johannesburg as evidence of municipal collapse under ANC-DA governance. He says the party will prioritize delivering basic services to residents if elected to govern municipalities.
The people who are governing there in Midrand is the ANC and the DA, and they must both collectively be punished in the next local government elections. Under the EFF government will provide water everywhere, especially in areas like Midrand.
And finally, the U.S. government is withdrawing 700 federal agents from the state of Minnesota, where there have been weeks of clashes over President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Border Security Chief Tom Hoffman says the drawdown will be effective immediately and that tremendous progress has been made in coordination with local officials. Hoffman outlined his conditions for a complete drawdown of the remaining 2,000 federal agents.
My goal with the support of President Trump is to achieve a complete drawdown and end this surge as soon as we can. But that is largely contingent upon the end of the illegal and threatening activities against ICE and its federal partners that we're seeing in the community.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, former Banyana player is optimistic that the team will win the COSAFA Cup. Proteas go down to India in high-scoring T20 World Cup warm-up match. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
7:00 7:04 Central African time it is as we enter the second hour of Rise and Shine. We say good morning to you and thank you for waking up with us, Africa. We are Channel Africa, coming to you from our Johannesburg studios live in South Africa from the African perspective, and you can connect with us on channelafrica.co.za, on SABC Plus app via mobile phones, on at Channel Africa 1, that's our social media handle. We're live streaming on YouTube via that, and you can also find us on our other social media platforms for your questions and your views about our programming. I am Asanda Beda and I'm with Peter Ndoro.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Friday Eve.
Absolutely. Yeah, in the second hour of the program, one thing I'm going to be looking at is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Now, the United States has just extended that for another year. Our Trade Minister, Parks Tower, seems optimistic. But I have to say that this AGOA Act is for eligible countries, and the US decides who is eligible. So I'm wondering if South Africa is going to be on that list this year. So we'll be chatting to Professor Patrick Bond is going to make sense of this for us.
And then we talk female genital mutilation, or FGM. Why are we still talking about this in 2026 as a challenge to eradicate completely? We know it's a human rights violation. We know that laws are banning the practice, but it's something that we're still battling with. So a new report from Equality Now is making some suggestions in terms of how this issue can be tackled. One of them being closing legal gaps in terms of dealing with FGM. So we'll be speaking to a regional representative for Southern Africa for Equality Now on that. Those stories and more coming up on the second hour.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. The voice of the continent, now online, with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more. 6 decades strong, Channel Africa continues to inspire Africa and the world, proudly sharing
The African perspective.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126, and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
The United States has just approved a one-year extension of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, known as AGOA, a preferential trade program that lets eligible African countries export thousands of products to the U.S. markets duty-free. Now, the short-term renewal signed into law by President Donald Trump and now running through to December the 31st, 2026, offers some certainty for exporters, but has been described by analysts as a fragile reprieve, raising questions about the future of Africa-US trade ties and the continent's economic sovereignty. Well, South Africa's continued inclusion remains delicate amid diplomatic tensions, and many African leaders are pressing for deeper regional integration and diversified trade partnerships. Well, joining us to unpack what all of this means for Africa's trade, investment, and economic future, Professor Patrick Bond, a political economist and distinguished professor of sociology at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Prof, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Hello, Prof, can you hear me? All right, it looks like we're struggling to hear Professor Bond. But I'm hoping that we can fix that and have this conversation, because it is an important one. My gut feeling is that Donald Trump is going to weaponize AGOA, actually, and essentially say to African nations, if you toe the line, in other words, my line, you'll get the benefits of AGOA, and if you don't, you're going to be on the list of ineligible countries. I think Professor Bond is there. Prof, are you there? Hello, Prof. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Sorry.
Ah, brilliant. I can hear you now. Right. Okay, let's talk about this extension of AGOA. On the face of it, sounds like a good thing, but I just don't trust Donald Trump. And I've got a feeling he's going to weaponize this thing and say, if you toe the line, you're on the list. If you don't, you're not.
Yes, that's right. And we've seen so many acts of vindictive politics of making these fibs about the genocide of white Afrikaner farmers. And we've seen the extent to which Trump will play politics and act extremely erratically, even last week reducing the tariffs for Narendra Modi from 50 to 18%. And what he'd wanted out of that was more pressure on Russia. That means fewer purchases of oil. So there's a big geopolitical context. And, the best thing perhaps is if South Africa is off the radar screen in some ways, which now that the G20 is now a G19 expelling South Africa, hopefully there will be less kind of immediate attention to the role South Africa plays. That's one way. I think the other is to say, well, South Africa has had a great run at playing a moral leader in a world where there's a vast deficit. And I'm, of course, speaking of the International Court of Justice and the genocide claims against Israel and Palestine. The killing goes on at a reduced rate, but there's no question that genocide was the intent and has been, for all effective purposes, what's been happening. And I think that's the next question. Could we be able to revive some of that and find leadership? Because what we saw at Davos 2 weeks ago was people standing up to Trump, especially Europeans. They didn't want to see Greenland invaded, and they won. We've seen the Chinese step up to Trump on the same topic we're talking about now, tariffs, and they won by threatening to withhold the rare earth minerals. So I think it's a very fluid situation, and you're right to have the skepticism you do, Peter.
So we're talking about South Africa, but there are a number of African countries, and I suppose each country will have its own case. How significant is AGOA for African economies?
Well, it's extremely significant for several of them, where the announcement of the end of AGOA, or precisely it was on April 2nd, the so-called Liberation Day last year, the announcement of major new tariffs, for example, 50% on Lesotho. And it's worth maybe going back just to remind ourselves. So Lesotho's exports to the United States were basically blue jeans, Wranglers and Levi's. And once the 50% tariffs were put in, although after a few days everything was cut back a bit, but what the effect was to massively reduce the output of clothing from Lesotho. For Angola, it hasn't had such a big effect because while Angola had 0% tariffs because of oil being the main export to the US, the 0% tariff on oil, and indeed on many of our raw materials like platinum and gold, that's continued. So Trump's been very erratic in the application, and then what he did with the original April 2nd, 2025 tariffs that just put everything into chaos. The stock markets were crashing, and he was forced to sort of revisit that. But what it did was to reflect the trade surpluses that countries had. So Lesotho had quite a big trade surplus, and many African countries do. We export a great deal of raw materials. They're processed in the US production systems, but in fact, to a large extent, our trade deficits in the continent are with China, because that's where the most immediate source of our imports, manufactured goods, come from. South Africa being a good example, and we're losing dramatically in steel and tires and nuts and bolts, washing machines. Those were the subject of punitive tariffs by South Africa against China last year because of that flow. So the world trade system's in havoc, and the threat of this, what we would call it dumping, that's a technical term for selling below the cost of production, which many Chinese companies do because they're so excess in their productive output. And that's meant that when China, let me say the secondary effect of Trump's tariffs, when China couldn't get 20% of its exports to the US in because of the new tariffs going up to 47% there, well, they redirected. They displaced those exports, and South Africa was one of the victims of that. And we've lost big chunks of our steel industry and other industries. Even yesterday, they were announcing that imports had flooded our carton paper packaging industry, and that's now closed down its main plant here. So we're in a situation, I think, where Trump is creating havoc that's spreading all around the world. And I don't think this minor concession, which is a renewal just until December of AGOA, given his tendency, as we said with Modi, with Lula in Brazil, a 50% tariff to punish Lula for having prosecuted his predecessor for the coup in 2023, the coup attempt, those reflect that Trump wants to play politics.
What must we infer? What do we read about this short extension, a year? But I mean, I guess it's 11 and a bit months now, just 11 months actually. such a short term. Is it that he's waiting to see how his strategy works before deciding again? How do we read into it?
Well, the discussions, I happened to be in Washington the end of last week, and discussions that I had suggested that there are probably major importers of goods from Africa who'd gotten used to the no tariff deal, and they kept it going. There's also potentially votes in the United Nations where Trump is beginning to not just treat African countries as S-hole countries and dismiss them, but actually have to worry about whether the UN would have this large number of votes, 54 votes from Africa. That's always a factor and helped motivate the original AGOA back 26 years ago. So I think it's a combination, and the fact that it isn't really that big a chunk of the US import market. And there is still a degree of concern in the US about importing inflation. The prices are still at a level much higher, well, at least 3% higher than they were in when Trump took office just over a year ago. And of course, his big platform was to lower prices. So if you lower tariffs on goods from Africa, you get a small benefit. We've already seen, as I said, with energy, a 0% tariff. And our major exports to the US in the form of the raw minerals and the smelted metals, those being kept at 0%. That hasn't really been a factor now in the renewal of AGOA. I think what will be a factor is that automobiles, which were really down and out, we've been seeing some of the Eastern Cape factories maybe consider selling to China for them to take over those factories, or we've seen Mercedes with a dramatic decline. They at one point issued figures saying it was an 82% fall in the first half of 2025 in U.S. South African auto exports to U.S. That's an extraordinary hit, and so it meant huge downsizing at our main Mercedes and some of the other factories sending cars. Now that was even before August, when there was a 30% tariff imposed, even before April 2nd. That was back in February when our steel and aluminium plus the cars were hit with 25%, just the first action of Trump in February of 2025. So we saw already the impact. We haven't had the latest figures, but I would say that plus our wines, our grapes, those are the two vineyard products that have also had the 30% exports since August. The citrus they put on, but then they took off in November. So now the interesting thing, who gets hurt? Afrikaner farmers, for one. I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? That welcoming a few hundred in as refugees, it may ultimately be a few thousand, but it's been a slow and tokenistic process of saving the Afrikaner farmers from genocide, right? That ridiculous meme. But he has had a few refugees. But actually, when you look at the real impact, I think the data might show when it comes out in the coming days and weeks that 2025 was a bad year for wine and grape exports, mostly. So we lost a lot of the steel market and aluminium. We're also losing some of that now to Europe because of the new carbon tariffs, right? The taxes on the very, very high CO2 impact of coal that goes into the energy that goes into the products that go to Europe. And next year it will be the UK. So we're seeing a lot of tariffs, and some are good, I think, in the sense they are addressing climate crisis. Some are just this whimsical politics.
And briefly, if you could just say, I guess with every challenge comes an opportunity to reset. We saw this with Russia, Ukraine. Europe started to think about where else they could get their gas. Is this an opportunity to accelerate the African continental free trade area and get into Africa trade going so that less dependence on the goodwill of things like AGOA?
It should be, Peter, because the African Continental Free Trade area has been a real failure. It's now over 5 years and has done really nothing to increase the ratio of intra-African trade. It's still around 15% of total trade. So we're still in that treadmill of exporting raw materials and importing from, especially from China, from manufactured products. So the big step would probably be the African Export-Import Bank signing on, which has just happened this week. And I think the main thing is that South Africa has been a laggard and not been playing the kind of aggressive role I'd expected with South African companies exporting to the continent. And, I think the simple reason for that is many of the African countries are in a debt trap and they're paying whatever forex they have. They got a big cut in their US aid and some of the other European aid, which cut down their forex. The commodity prices crashed except for gold and platinum, and that cut their forex, and paying the debt with still very high interest rates, that takes the forex. And so that means to buy South African goods, not much money.
Professor Patrick Bond, great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts and analysis.
Thanks very much, Peter.
That's Professor Patrick Bond, a political economist and distinguished professor of sociology at the University of Johannesburg, unpacking this extension of AGOA for just a year. But one gets a sense that we need to be a little suspicious.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. 60 years of broadcasting Africa to the world. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV, ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Let's focus now on female genital mutilation, or FGM, a global human rights violation affecting an estimated 230 million women and girls. While laws banning the practice exist in many countries, enforcement is often weak and survivors face significant barriers to justice. A new report by Equality Now, supported by the Thomson Reuters Foundation, looks at how strategic litigation is being used around the world to strengthen protections, close legal gaps, and defend hard-won laws. We now speak to Sally Ncube, Equality Now's regional representative for Southern Africa, about the findings of this report and the role of courts in the fight to end FGM. Sally, thank you for joining us for this very important topic. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Hope you're well.
It's our pleasure. Why in 2026 are we still talking FGM, female genital mutilation? As we know, it's a human right abuse. It has also been banned in other countries, a lot of countries, in fact. It's unlawful, but we're still battling to do away with it completely.
So the thing is, while female genital mutilation in quite a number of African countries have been, there are laws that are against or that are anti-FGM, we still have religious practices. We still have communities where survivors of female genital mutilation do not access justice and are not aware of their rights. And communities also are not aware that it is a violation of human rights and that it is a serious crime, and that there are laws and processes to protect survivors, or there are laws and processes to ensure that perpetrators are held accountable. So with weak enforcement mechanisms, the duty bearers like the police, the duty bearers, the prosecutors not being adequately equipped on the interpretation of the law and how to support survivors, it's creating a gap between the rights holders and the duty bearers and quality or even access to justice. For those that are also living with disabilities, whether they are visually impaired or they also have sign language. There are also access to justice and information challenges in that most of the information is packaged in a manner that those with disabilities cannot easily access information to get support, to get even legal aid, and to be able to have an opportunity for the support they require or protection they require as victims or witnesses.
So in this new Equality Now report, you speak about the role of courts in the fight against it. But let's talk about the strategic litigation that you touch on. Can you explain what this is and how it helps survivors?
So when we talk about strategic litigation, it is a process whereby there are cases that are identified which will result in systemic change. When we talk about systemic change, it's change that is broader than an individual complainant or an individual survivor. It's something that is broader to a point that when that case goes through the court and a decision is given, it set precedents that then becomes a tool of advocacy or a tool of interpretation of the law and applying of the law beyond an individual case, but for generations to come and even across borders for other countries. It also creates a front line for accurate interpretation of what the law provides for. And it brings FGM out of the shadows to a point that it becomes in the public space. It raises awareness. It stimulates dialogue. It also creates a space for survivors to gain confidence that there is a law that works and that is a violation. And perpetrators also retreat. It has the deterrent, effect. And when we look at judgments being given, we look at court decisions, they also showcase where the law is lacking, where there are gaps, where there are loopholes. And it actually creates or accelerates political will, where there is no enforcement, where there are gaps in government investment and delivery in terms of government obligations to protect the rights of women, girls, and survivors. So when the courts decide on a matter that is related to FGM, it brings to light FGM that is normally in the shadows. It creates an interpretation of the law and exposes the gaps that are existing. And some of the decisions even give direction to the service providers from the health, from the psychosocial support, from other social protection measures, which will in turn create a support mechanism for survivors to be protected and an enabling environment for those whose rights have been violated to come out and speak out. And some even enforce for government and duty bearers to act. So when FGM is in the courtroom, it is really making it serious that FGM is a crime, it's a violation of rights, and duty bearers have to act.
As much as there are challenges and there are those who struggle to access justice, let's just, as a final point and a brief one, give an example then from the report where you've seen taking a case to court making a real difference for a woman or a girl.
So, for example, when we look at the case of Kenya, when there was a judgment that actually brought in a decision to show in the outlaw, we could see that there are now clawbacks, or there is now organized resistance in trying to work backwards the hard-won gains around the law. So some were bringing in justification around FGM being an issue of people practicing their own religious rights, or sanitizing the violations with the medicalization argument of it. So the court ruling and the decision that came from the Constitutional Court of Kenya actually continued to affirm that FGM is a violation of rights, and it continued and it did not put any exceptions on religion and medicalization.
Great. We're going to leave it on that positive note. And thank you so much, Sally, for your time again.
Thank you for having us. And tomorrow being an international day to end FGM, we call on all actors to play their part, and for us as different individuals with our different expertise, and appreciate this media platform for taking FGM seriously as a human rights violation and a serious crime that we need to end impunity through the law and the courtroom, and supporting communities with education and support for survivors.
Our absolute pleasure. Sally Ncube is Equality Now's regional representative for Southern Africa, speaking to us live this morning from Nairobi about the role of courts and strategic litigation in the fight against FGM or female genital mutilation. 7:31 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines. Here is Jwalani Tulo Ngwebe.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, Morocco has urged residents of flood-prone areas in the country's northwestern plains to leave immediately amid rising threats of inundation from heavy rain, swollen rivers, and the release of more water from full dams. The African Union Commission chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf says the continental body will continue to support Madagascar. He has received a briefing from his special envoy in Madagascar, Mohamed Idris Farah, in Addis Ababa. And finally, the U.S. government is withdrawing 700 federal agents from the state of Minnesota, where there have been weeks of clashes over President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's been happening in the world of sport as we say good morning to Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We kick off with football news. Former Banyana player Ruda Mulaudzi says the women's national football team will most likely add the 8th COSAFA Women's Championship title to their trophy cabinet. South African senior women's national football team has been drawn with Malawi, Lesotho and Angola in Group A of the 2025 Hollywood Bets COSAFA Women's Championship. Limpopo's capital, Polokwane, in South Africa, will host the first COSAFA tournament for the first time since 2018. The tournament kicks off on the 18th of February. Mulaudzi says Banyana stands a good chance of lifting the title.
The COSAFA Women's Championship exists to elevate the game across the region. This year's competition takes an even greater importance as a final and high-intensity preparation for 3 of our member associations, Malawi, South Africa and Zambia.
And on to cricket news. The Proteas went down to India by 30 runs at the D.Y. Patel Stadium in Navi, Mumbai in their only warm-up match ahead of the 2026 T20 World Cup being hosted by India and Sri Lanka over the next month. Despite the defeat, it was a worthwhile outing for the South Africans as a number of players got some valuable game time, although they will be a bit disappointed that they weren't able to take more wickets or put up a better fight. India won the toss and batted first, slamming their way to a monster 240 for 5 at the end of their 20 overs, with Isham Kisham 53 of 20 balls and Tilak Varma 45 of 19. And in golf news, we wrap up with South African golfer Charles Schwartzel is looking forward to raking up some victories in the 2026 Live Golf League, which kicks off next week. Following a lengthy break and having now had a few weeks of preparation under his belt, Live Golf Riyadh new season will officially be underway until the 7th of February. The target for Schwartzel and Southern Guard GC, formerly known as the Stingers GC, is simple. Get a couple of wins under their belt, especially on home soil in mid-March.
For me to have called it the group of death is because I look at the quality of the teams that are in the...
It's, goals are to win. It's really what we practice for. It is hard to win in I feel in the modern day. There's so many good players. But again, there's somebody who wins every week, and yeah, that'll be my main goal, is to see if I can have 1 or 2 wins. And then from the team side, I feel very excited about the team. I feel like at this stage, there's 4 guys playing good golf.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Coming up on Rise and Shine, we take a look at a story where South Africa is having to consider what sustainable healthcare delivery may look like in years to come. We know, of course, there have been global changes in U.S. foreign aid, and not just South Africa, but the entire continent of Africa has been affected. So we'll be focusing on what South Africa's President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief should be looking at to tackle that challenge.
Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's get news from the world of business now from the African perspective, as we say good morning again to Tabiso Lehogu.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The United States is proposing a critical minerals trade bloc among allied countries in a move largely viewed as seeking to counter China. The plan was unveiled at a U.S.-hosted ministerial summit in Washington, D.C. on critical minerals, with representatives of more than 50 countries in attendance, South Africa not among them. The move comes after President Donald Trump announced the launch of a critical mineral strategic stockpile named Project Vault earlier this week. Backed by some $12 billion in seed funding, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told the summit that they intended to build an ironclad network of new industrial supply chains to span the entire nation.
Our goal here, and the reason why we're doing this conference, is to align trade policy, development finance, and diplomatic engagement towards a shared strategic objective. And that objective is very simple: diversifying global supply in the critical minerals market while strengthening the partner countries who help all of us in this shared effort.
The South African Chamber of Commerce in the U.S. says the one-year extension of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act will help to restore business confidence. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pak Stow has confirmed that South Africa remains a beneficiary of AGOA, which provides duty-free access to the U.S. market for its automotive, agriculture and manufactured goods. There was anxiety among exporters following AGOA's expiration in September last year. It's now been extended to the 31st of December this year. The Chamber's chairperson, Neil Diamond, however, says that they have some concerns.
As business, we are concerned about the relationship and the ongoing tensions. We still do not have an ambassador in the United States, and as business, we'll be sending a delegation next month to meet with Minister Ronald Lamola to raise our concerns with the minister. We are very happy with the work that Minister Pak Stow have done, but we are concerned that the overall political relationship may have long-term economic ramifications.
Nigeria's NNPC is in talks with a Chinese company over one of the state-owned oil firm's refineries. NNPC Chief Executive Bayo Ojulari says the company was seeking experienced operators as equity partners to revive its 4 refineries after years of losses and underperformance. He says an internal review carried out shortly after assuming his role last April showed the refineries were running at huge losses, with high operating costs and heavy spending on contractors, while processing volumes remained low. Kenya's private sector activity grew, but at A slower pace in January, hurt by slower expansions in the construction and wholesale and retail sectors. The Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchasing Managers Index fell to 51.9% in January from 53.7% in December. Readings above 50.0 indicate growth in business activity, while those below signal contraction. In comments accompanying the survey, Stanbic Bank says sectoral differences were marked, with sales growth most often recorded among manufacturing firms. The U.S. workplace regulator is investigating the sportswear manufacturer Nike over allegations that it treated white employees less favorably. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has taken the matter to court after Nike failed to provide all the company records on layoffs and the use of race and ethnicity data. Nike has described the court action as a surprising and unusual escalation. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has the details.
The agency is also examining a number of internal programs it says may have restricted mentoring or career development on the basis of race. Nike responded, calling the court action a surprising and unusual escalation. The company said it takes the matter seriously, had already provided thousands of pages of information, and will continue to cooperate with the agency.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 376. In Botswana, it's at 13.19 Kenya, 128 shilling 9, and Zambia 19 kwacha 50. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5.24, Russia 76 rubles 57, India 90 rupees 392, China 6 yuan 93, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 15 rand 99 cents. 73 pence a British pound, 84 to the euro. Gold is trading at $4,884, while platinum is at $2,070 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $67.98 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Channel Africa and you have got something in common. The thirst for knowledge. 60 years of Channel Africa. Your trusted voice. Your African perspective into the future. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's go to Ethiopia now, where the Prime Minister in the country, Abiy Ahmed, pushed back against claims by U.S. President Donald Trump that Ethiopia's massive new hydroelectric dam was funded by the United States. The $4 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, built on a tributary on the Nile River, is said to generate more than 5,000 megawatts of electricity, making it the largest power-producing dam in Africa. But the project remains highly contentious. Egypt, a close U.S. ally that relies on the Nile for nearly all of its water supply, has warned the dam poses an existential threat. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
Speaking on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos last month, President Donald Trump repeated the claim, saying the dam was financed by the United States and that it effectively blocks the Nile. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed rejected that assertion, telling Parliament that the project was built without loans or financial assistance from any foreign country. From an economic standpoint, what does Ethiopia's decision to self-finance the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam say about its fiscal capacity and long-term development strategy? Economics professor at the Tshwane University, Mulatu Fek Atuzorion, weighs in.
So in a country of such a big population and ancient nation in Africa, the sad thing is more than 60% of the population has been living in darkness, no electricity, no power supply, especially in a rural part of the country. So from economic standpoint, Ethiopia's decision to largely self-finance the grant. By the way, every Ethiopian, young and old, men and women, they financed it from their meager resources. Everyone across the board. So it signals, this great dam signals a deliberate assertion of fiscal sovereignty. You see, sovereignty is everything about. Fiscal sovereignty is important.
While he acknowledged the significance of the achievement, he says it was not an easy task.
So given the politics, the water politics in the region, it was very hardly to secure a fund. Therefore, Ethiopia is determined to finance this big mega project by themselves. It's a symbolic for Africa as well. Together, the current government is following Medamar philosophy, meaning coming together, synergy. It means together we can do more. Together we can do better.
Professor Fek Aduzurian says this can reshape regional economic relations in the Nile Basin.
First of all, this Nile is the largest river in the world. It has been connecting east and north of Africa. That's supposed to create a natural bond between the Nile countries, the Nile Basin countries. It's supposed to be, a bond to hold all the countries, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, all the other countries together. It's a natural bond. Otherwise, given the colonial history, Egypt has been using Nile in a monopoly power, which is not acceptable in a current context. So to avoid a zero-sum game in this dispute, Ethiopia can utilize Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, for hydroelectric generation, because as mentioned before, 60% of the population living in the darkness, no electricity, and it is really disastrous.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, it's look, coming up in a short while, we're going to be chatting about an interesting topic, actually, and that's health funding. We saw global shifts in US foreign aid in this past year, particularly freezing on funding from once flagship President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, and this has sent shockwaves through health systems across the sub-Saharan Africa. We'll be unpacking that a little bit with the co-founder and CEO of Endless Life Group, and that's coming up shortly. Stay with us.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has connected the continent. Celebrate the journey. Celebrate the African perspective.
Ritmos e Cultura. Com Jacob Tivani.
Meus ouvintes do Ritmos e Cultura, hoje em linha com uma das grandezas da música moçambicana, porque não? Ele que é um dos kings da marrabenta, uma bermuda in the building.
É um prazer enorme estar a fazer parte deste programa. Deixe-me só saudar. Boa tarde a todos os ouvintes que me ouvem neste preciso momento. Meu nome é Uma Bermuda, de Alau Fanelo Estarapo, Gajo Aguda Fanhela é Mabiscato. Eu vou saudar de uma maneira diferente. Ah, titavuya mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ah, titavuya mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ani motive lwa baba yena otiva mina haikonama. Ani motive lwa nona yena otiva wahimbo. Watwa, cá estou eu, irmão, para conversarmos, para falarmos um pouco de tudo. Estou aqui, estou aberto. Eu estou muito feliz porque é a primeira vez que eu falo nesta rádio, falo para os ouvintes, então estou muito feliz.
Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Todos os domingos, das 20 às 21 horas.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Global shifts in US foreign aid, especially the freeze on funding from the once flagship President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, have sent shockwaves through health systems across sub-Saharan Africa. South Africa, which is home to around 8 million people living with HIV, and the region's largest treatment program, has seen critical HIV prevention and care services disrupted as US support was paused and renegotiated at much lower levels. After months of uncertainty and temporary bridge plan to sustain some services into early 2026, experts warn that the big picture remains fragile and the risk of reversed gains is real. Well, today we're joined by Zaki Njifo, who's a co-founder and CEO of the Endless Life Group, to unpack what these shifts mean for health systems in South Africa and beyond. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program. Hello,
Thank
Zaki,
you very
can you
much.
hear me?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, Zaki, I'm
Yes,
going
I
to
hear you
assume
loud
that
and
you can
clear.
hear me. Many listeners may not know what PEPFAR, may not know PEPFAR by name. And for listeners across the continent, briefly explain what PEPFAR is and why it has mattered so much for HIV treatment and prevention.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, PEPFAR is what we call the U.S. President Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, which has been running for over 2 decades globally, funding the reduction of HIV/AIDS prevalence and prevention, as well as treatment and care globally in many development and low-income countries. That's what PEPFAR is. It's a Senate-approved fund that was instituted to aid developing countries to address the HIV/AIDS pandemic.
So we saw US aid policy shift rapidly in 2025, and that paused PEPFAR. What impact has this funding disruption already had on HIV services in South Africa and other countries?
Well, we see the impact vary globally from countries to country. For countries where health budgets really do not exist, you find that the impact is more severe. In South Africa, the impact has varied because the PEPFAR-funded HIV program funded part of our treatment and care, and also funded aspects of most of our prevention work in South Africa. We do know that South Africa does invest well in its healthcare. However, a component of our health funding was supported hugely by the US PEPFAR funding into the country, up until about 4 to 8% of it. And so with the cut in funding, you do find that aspects of HIV prevention has suffered dismally, and a lot of organizations have had to close shop because they no longer have funding to provide HIV prevention services to the population. Some components of treatment and care were affected, components of TB treatment affected across the country, and also issues of healthcare workers. You know, the PEPFAR funded programs to support health workers across the country significantly in certain parts of the districts, right up with technical staff. So there's been a lot of disruption in areas where the PEPFAR funding went into in South Africa. But this does not compare to what we see in other countries that largely are donor reliant.
How prepared are health systems to absorb those services if external funding continues to fluctuate in the way that we're seeing?
Well, South African health system, by virtue of its name, is a health system. It is relatively strong compared to its counterparts in Africa. Prepared, I wouldn't say we were. I don't think the health system was prepared to lose that significant. I mean, we're talking about 750 odd something million rand, that was lost to funding in South Africa. So I don't think we're prepared for that kind of a cut, and so abruptly, if I may say. And so, yes, I don't think any system is ever prepared for that kind of a shock. And so one of the things that the health department, I am aware, is really focusing on is making that system more resilient, to ensure that should there be future cuts, the system is able to absorb the shortfall. And that's what I think it's really coming to the forefront with what the Department of Health and the government of South Africa is putting in place to support and elevate what the challenges we see and even foresee with the withdrawal of the PEPFAR funding to South Africa.
Are we seeing reversals of gains that had been made over time as a result of this?
Absolutely. We've seen some reversal of gain, but I think that the Ministry of Health is playing significant catch up. We've seen some reversal in treatment and care, to loss to what we call loss to tracking. Those that are on treatment, loss to tracking in the period that some NGOs had to close down their programs. However, NGOs work very collaboratively in South Africa, and I think South Africa is a slightly different health environment because it is not solely dependent on donor funding. And we've seen in that collaboration, because in any case, with the PEPFAR funding, we've always had 2 decades of PEPFAR treatment and care partners working very closely with the South African government. With clinics, they work hand to hand. With clinics in different districts, in wards, they work hand to hand with the National Department of Health. So where there has been reversal of gains, they've been marginal, and so the government has been able to quickly start pulling those clients back or patients back into the public sector. And I think with time, especially with the efforts that we see the South African government putting forth, availing resources to support and elevate some of the pressure on the healthcare system, we do think that the whole target, that what we call the 95-95 target, will be restored. We are very well on track. However, we need to mobilize areas which are struggling, for example, support with healthcare workers and other support services that needs to kick in to see that we fully achieve those targets as the years go by.
I suppose looking ahead, 2026, what concrete steps do you think national and regional levels need to be put into place to safeguard critical health programs and build sustainable systems going forward?
Well, I think we saw in South Africa we do have we are not short of systems, we're not short of policies. Most of what we need to do going into the future is really prioritization, right? So we need to reorder our priorities, and I think a lot of focus needs to be on protecting core services into the community. So we need to see community services and core direct services that are patient-facing, patient services restored fully. Okay, so I think that is really what the government is prioritizing in this season, which is absolutely correct, because we need to maintain people on treatment, maintain people on care and support, as well as building what we call sustainable domestic health financing. Sort of intermittent support would not work to build a resilient system. So
Zwaki, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thank you so much indeed for your enlightening thoughts on this situation. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Peter.
That was Zwaki Njifo, co-founder and CEO of Endless Life Group, talking to us about these shortages in funding.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
And we now enter the third and final hour of Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you've just joined us, it's with Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro. Let's get our news headlines. The main bulletin, the first one for this hour, at 8 o'clock Central African time. Here's Jolani Tulo Mwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Morocco has urged residents of flood-prone areas in the country's northwestern plains to leave immediately amid rising threats of inundation from heavy rain, swollen rivers and the release of more water from full dams. 37 people have died and more than 100,000 have been evacuated from 4 provinces after flash floods swept several areas. Gunmen in central Nigeria are reported to have killed more than 160 people in a remote village in Kwara State. Local politicians and Red Cross officials say soldiers are searching the nearby bush for people who survived the massacre. The BBC's Mokwachi Okava has the details.
A local lawmaker told the BBC that gunmen set homes and shops on fire, forcing residents to flee into the nearby bush. Several people were still missing on Wednesday. Armed attacks on rural communities have increased across north-central and northwest Nigeria, with Kwara State reporting a rise in violence near its border with Niger State. The government has promised to tighten security, but so far there has been little improvement.
The African Union Commission chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf says the continental body will continue to support Madagascar. He has received a briefing from his special envoy in Madagascar, Mohamed Idris Farah, in Addis Ababa. The island nation plunged into a political crisis after it had a coup last year. Kaelihle Kumalo has the story.
Ambassador Idris Farah says there's been progress on the situation in Madagascar. He told the AU boss Mahmoud Ali Yusuf that authorities in Antananarivo are committed to push for an inclusive, credible political dialogue and reported encouraging economic indicators in the island nation. The AU chief Yusuf has reaffirmed the continental body's principal approach to political transition and respect for Madagascar-led solution.
The Economic Freedom Fighters Party in South Africa has raised fresh concerns about the credibility of the Independent Electoral Commission ahead of the upcoming local government elections. Speaking after the party's second plenum, EFF leader Julius Malema says the party has lost confidence in the IEC's ability to conduct free and fair elections, alleging political bias within the institution. The IEC has previously rejected claims of political interference and maintains it operates independently and impartially. Malema, however, warns that relying on the IEC poses a risk to democracy.
IEC, I think there's a crisis there, but, to rely on the IEC actually is suicidal. I think more money now is going into, from the EFF's point of view, into securing an EFF vote. There are thugs in the IEC. It's not discrepancy. He's talking nonsense. There are thugs in the IEC who work for the ANC, who are from the ANC.
The last nuclear arms control agreement between the US and Russia has expired 16 years after it was signed. It limited each side to about 1,500 long-range warheads. Campaigners have warned that its demise could start a new arms race between nuclear powers. The BBC's Helena Humphrey has the story.
Russia's foreign ministry has said it assumes neither side will remain bound by those limits. In a statement, Moscow said it would continue to act responsibly but would take decisive countermeasures if its security were threatened. While Washington has not immediately responded, President Trump has previously said he wants China included in any future deal. Pope Leo has urged both nations to renew the treaty, saying the current world situation requires everything possible to avert a new arms race.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Mwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Sports headline: Ethiopia dominate women's events in Ostrava. And former Banyana Banyana player is optimistic that the team will win the COSAFA Cup. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
This is the third hour of Rise and Shine, the final hour of the program, the Thursday edition. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. We're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa on channelafrica.co.za on the internet. And you can also catch us on our social media platforms and just type in Channel Africa and you probably will find us quite easily. My name is Peter Ndoro, broadcasting with Asanda Beda.
Right, and one of the stories we'll be looking at in this hour, Egypt has come under intense scrutiny in Human Rights Watch's latest World Report of 2026. The report saying that during 2025, Egyptian authorities systemically restricted basic freedoms, jailed journalists and activists, among other things. I think they were the first in doing this internet shutdown in modern day Africa, before it became a trend with everybody else actually.
Now it's standard practice, isn't it?
Now it has become standard practice, unfortunately. So that's one of the stories we'll be looking at, unpacking that Human Rights Watch report.
Yeah, stay with us for all of that and more right here on this third and final hour of Rise and Shine, on where we bring you the African perspective.
The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
África. Conhece o Ntivani? Claro que sou eu. O Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma. Eu amo música africana. Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa. Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
South Africa has taken a major step in deepening its economic ties with the rest of the continent. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country's accession to the African Export-Import Bank marks a strategic move to boost intra-African trade, industrial development, and regional value chains. Speaking in Johannesburg at the signing of the Instrument of Accession on Wednesday, Ramaphosa described the partnership as both ambitious and timely, as Afrexim Bank pledged an $8 billion investment into South Africa's economy. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe filed this report.
The signing ceremony marks South Africa's formal transition to Class A shareholder status in Afrexim Bank and signals the activation of strategic partnership aimed at advancing industrial development, export trade growth, and deeper intra-Africa trade integration. In his remarks, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the signing represents an intentional, inclusive, and ambitious step designed to deliver meaningful impact.
Today's signing signals a deliberate as well as an ambitious and more impactful phase in our country's economic engagement with our beloved African continent as well as the world. For South Africa, the decision to accede to Afrexim Bank represents a strategic alignment. We seek to contribute to an Africa that prioritizes intracontinental trade, that builds its own industrial base and capacity and also mobilizes African financial institutions to support development.
Ramaphosa added that the partnership will boost South Africa's support for exporters, industrial projects, and regional value chains at a time of both challenge and opportunity.
This partnership will strengthen, in more ways than one, South Africa's ability to support exporters, South African exporters, that is, industrial projects and regional value chains, while advancing our continent's development. South Africa accedes to Afreximbank at a time of both challenge, which at times makes people terrified, but it is also a time of great opportunity for our continent and indeed for our country as well.
Afreximbank President George Elombi announced an initial $8 billion funding package for South Africa, describing it as a deliberate and purposeful commitment, marking the country's full membership of the bank.
I am therefore pleased, Your Excellency, that together with the South African Department of Trade and Industry, under the leadership of Honorable Minister Park Stow, we have put together with him and his colleagues what we consider an important package to signify that South Africa's complete membership of Afreximbank was intended, it was deliberate, it was purposeful. We have put together an important package of $8 billion United States dollars, an initial package of $8 billion United States dollars for South Africa.
He said the funding will focus on local processing of natural resources, mineral beneficiation, automotive manufacturing, and the expansion of industrial parks and special economic zones to boost jobs, revenue, and value retention in South Africa.
We intend to do very heavy investments in the local processing of natural resources, thereby helping retain value within our economies, create jobs, generate wealth for our people. For that's the ultimate objective. We intend to expand the revenue base for the South African fiscal authorities. In particular, we will prioritize mineral processing, the expansion of the automotive manufacturing and development, and the expansion of industrial parks and specialized zones.
Speaking virtually, Secretary General of African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, said South Africa's accession to Afreximbank sends a strong signal of commitment to African-led solutions, stressing that trade finance is critical to the success of continental integration under the AfCFTA.
This ceremony is therefore significant not just for South Africa and Afreximbank, it is also significant for the implementation of the AfCFTA. The success of the AfCFTA depends not only on market access, but also on the availability of trade finance to support production and trade-enabling infrastructure. Today's event sends a clear and powerful signal that Africa's leading economies are committed to African solutions by supporting and enabling African institutions to finance Africa's economic development and continental integration.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
The United States chapter of the South African Chamber of Commerce has welcomed the reauthorization of the African Growth and Opportunity Act through to the end of the year, with South Africa remaining a beneficiary for now. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer says that the extension will aptly retroactively to September last year when AGOA had lapsed. He added that a 21st century version of AGOA should place greater expectations on U.S. trading partners and signaled readiness to work with Congress over the coming year to modernize the program in line with President Donald Trump's America First trade policy. Sherwin Brown-Spees picks up the story.
In signing a new government funding deal into law, President Trump also reauthorized AGOA for 1 year, backdated until September last year. A move described as having a stabilizing effect for South Africa by the U.S. chapter of the South African Chamber of Commerce, whose president is Neil Diamond.
Over the past few months, uncertainty created concern and real concern for companies managing long-term contracts, investors assessing opportunities and risk, and workers whose livelihoods depend on the AGOA framework. This decision removes a lot of that uncertainty and the cloud that was hanging over business, restoring some business confidence within a framework that business can operate. We need to be clear, it doesn't remove the tariff regime that has been implemented, especially reciprocal tariffs, but it at least gives us a breath of air in an environment where we need to continue bilateral trade between South Africa and the United States.
A statement from the U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer said his office would work with relevant U.S. agencies to give effect to any modifications made to the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States as a result of AGOA's reauthorization. The reciprocal tariffs imposed by President Trump last year appeared to undercut AGOA's benefits, although the legality of those unilateral levies remained the subject of a legal review by the Supreme Court after two lower courts already ruled them illegal, creating an additional layer of confusion in terms of what exactly the road ahead looks like, as Diamond explained.
We know that South Africa is the largest beneficiary under AGOA for sub-Sahara Africa, specifically in key sectors such as automotive manufacturing, agriculture and agro-processing, wine and value-added food products, and then industrial and manufactured components. Where we've been subject to those tariffs, AGOA is really going to give us some relief from those tariffs. Exactly how this plays out will be dependent on an engagement between the U.S. Trade Representative Jamie Greer, as well as Minister Park Stow and the team from the Department of Trade and Industry. But we at least see this as a step in the right direction, restoring business confidence in the U.S.-South Africa economic relationship.
An overnight post on X by the principal deputy spokesperson of the State Department, Tommy Pigott, sharply criticized South Africa's decision to expel a senior Israeli diplomat from the country as, quote, another example of its poor foreign policy choices. After Durko declared the Israeli chargé d'affaires persona non grata for what it referred to as a series of unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms, raising questions about how the diplomatic relationship between Washington and Pretoria could impact the economic relationship moving forward, with any country's continued inclusion in AGOA now at the behest of the US president, who's empowered to exclude or suspend the country from the trade pact.
Under the current AGOA determinations, South Africa still remains eligible, but that eligibility is not automatic. It is subject to certain statutory and regulatory requirements, and that relates around to market access, trade openness, but also South Africa's foreign policy. And I think that is where economics and business becomes clouded. We'd like to stay as business out of the political environment, but we do encourage both governments for the sake of our bilateral trade and the benefit to both our countries to resolve those diplomatic issues.
Diamond said he viewed continued engagement around a bilateral trade agreement between Pretoria and Washington as moving in the right direction, while expressing optimism that a new modernized AGOA could be extended beyond the current December 31st deadline, with any signals from the White House and the trade representative being watched closely. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Okay, so 90 minutes past 8 Central African time. The 5th of February 2005, something significant happened in Togo. That was the passing of Gnassingbé Eyedema, who was the country's president of Togo at the time, and at the time he was Africa's longest-serving ruler. Died of a heart attack after 38 years in power, Asanda. His death caused a constitutional crisis when the military bypassed the legal line of succession to install, guess who? His son.
Of course.
Faure Gnassingbé as president. And guess who's the current president of...
The grandson.
The son is the president. So since 1962, There've only been 2 presidents in Togo. Nyasimbe Eyedama and his son. Gabon tried to play that same game as well. I don't know. Akitsib. That's a South Africanism for I don't know. More to follow. Stay with us.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation. As Africa renews, so does its voices. 60 years of Channel Africa. As 2025 draws to a close, we pause to honor the spirits that connect us. The festive season reminds us of what truly matters: family, community, and unity. No matter where you gather or reflect, Channel Africa is with you. Bring you stories and voices that are shaped by the African perspective.
Something significant happened on this day. Asanda, you were a baby, I'm sure. I'm not even sure if you were born. No, you were a baby, yeah.
Yoga. Matseko is still trying to convince me and look me over.
I've done that already, and you're going to come now on the journey.
I will try.
From all of us to all of you, may your season be safe and peaceful. Channel Africa, the African perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Waterfall City, north of Johannesburg in Gauteng, South Africa, continues to attract international companies. Property developer Attack is planning several new developments for the area. This includes a conference centre and a hotel, amongst others. The new developments come amid the group's strong performance, which has been boosted by several transactions in recent years. Here's Nhlanhla Mahlangu with more.
Johannesburg is set to welcome a game-changing addition to its urban landscape as Attack, a leading property developer, announced plans for a state-of-the-art conference centre and a hotel in the heart of Waterfall City. With a staggering $1.71 billion allocated for the new development, the project promises to redefine the city's commercial and hospitality sectors. Gary Kotza, CEO at Century City Conference Center and Hotels, says the 15,000 square kilometer Waterfall City Conference Center and Hotel is designed to become a premier destination for business and leisure travelers alike.
I think we've been looking at expanding our business to Johannesburg for many years, even pre-COVID, and we've been exploring various options. And certainly Waterfall City seems to be the new where the hustle and bustle is in Johannesburg at the moment. It's an upcoming developing area. A lot of your top corporates are moving here. So we needed to find a location that was centrally located, and then you have a lot of people when they do attend conferences, they also want to explore the city a little bit, so it's central. And then you've got the Mall of Africa, one of the largest malls, I think, in the Southern Hemisphere. And everybody likes to do a little bit of shopping while they're attending a conference, especially your international clientele with the favorable exchange rate. We are targeting a lot of Africa business, and there's a lot of direct flights from Africa into Johannesburg.
He says the project will create a number of jobs.
It's twofold. The one side is on the construction side. I mean, already we're dealing with consultants and engineers and plumbers and electricians and so on in the planning stage. And then obviously we'll start construction. And there we expected to have between 800 and 1,000 construction workers on site and consultants on site at any given point, which is massively important. But then from day one, we envisage to have approximately 500 permanently employed employees from day one. So the job creation is significant. And what people often forget in the tourism space is the knock-on effect of job creation.
Chifiwa Chivenga, CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, says with these projects, Johannesburg is poised to become a leading destination for innovation, commerce and luxury in South Africa.
Well, this is a good addition to the product range that we have, especially when it comes to the MICE sector, which is the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition. To have a new product, it means that there's confidence in the market. It means that there will be jobs that are going to be created. over a longer period of time. Of course, there will be construction jobs that are involved in that, but after that, we take over, we run the hotel and the convention center. So it is a stamp of approval on the destination when you see investors coming in and saying there is a need for a conference center, there's a need for a hotel, and to put it in this node, which is the Midrand node, and here at Waterfall City area, it simply means that there is more action happening in this part of the Gauteng province. And I think there's a greater need to have more and more products, especially in this segment of the market, which is the MICE sector.
The new conference center and hotel facility is planned to act as a premier centrally located venue for business travelers, enhancing the existing hospitality offering near the Mall of Africa. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
The leader of the Democratic Alliance Party in South Africa, John Steenhuisen, has officially announced he's dropping out of his party's leadership race. He announced his decision on Wednesday, saying that his tenure will be remembered for leading the party into the national government. Steenhuisen's decision not to seek a third term as party leader comes amid internal tension ahead of the elective Congress that's set to take place in April. Zanele Butelezi tells us more.
John Steenhuisen has been at the helm of the DA for 2 terms since 2019, but now he's stepping back, announcing he will not seek a third term in April. He praised the party's gains during his tenure, calling them the greatest achievements in the party's history. Chief among those achievements is growing the DA's electoral support to 21.8% in the 2024 general elections. He also led the party into joining the ANC in the government of national unity, gaining key cabinet posts. Steenhuisen declared mission accomplished, saying he's fulfilled his pledge to deliver a party of national government. However, he framed his decision as a move to focus on the foot-and-mouth disease crisis as the Minister of Agriculture.
I will not seek re-election for a third term as the DA federal leader at the party's upcoming federal Congress. And I do so with a full heart, knowing that I've accomplished my DA moonshot mission and that my work in government now requires me to similarly pour my heart and soul and all of my energies into defeating foot-and-mouth disease.
But it's not all been smooth sailing, as Steenhuisen's reign has been marred by controversy. His recent public fallout with the DA's former finance chair, Dion George, is said to have fueled tensions in the party. He also faced financial misconduct allegations, but an internal process cleared him of any wrongdoing. His decision to bow out of the leadership race comes after his rival George quit the party on January 15. But in his parting words, the 49-year-old politician had this warning on the dangers of internal party rifts.
As the DA, but also other GNU partners, hold internal elections over the coming months, it's paramount that we all continue to put South Africa ahead of factional and personal agendas. It would be a tragedy too great to contemplate for internal party maneuvering to plunge the GNU and our country into chaos.
But is Steenhuisen dropping out of the party's leadership race on his own terms? Zakhele Ndlovu is a political analyst based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
I think that as the DA prepares to contest the local government elections, I think some people felt that the party needed to sort of like change its image. And to do that, I think they had to get a new leader who's going to try and maybe instill more confidence, especially among white voters.
The DA is expected to elect its new leadership at the party's Federal Congress in Johannesburg in April. The DA in KwaZulu-Natal congratulated Steenhuisen on his tenure, with the leadership saying it's proud of his record and what he has delivered for the party. Zanele Butelezi, SABC News, Durban.
Right, it's 8:30 Central African time, which means it's time for your news headlines as we say good morning once again to Jwalani Tulo Ngwepe.
We are on OpenView's audio bouquet. Channel 628. SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, Zimbabwe's ex-president Robert Mugabe may have had financial ties with Jeffrey Epstein, according to the latest batch of files related to the convicted U.S. sex offender. Gunmen in central Nigeria are reported to have killed more than 160 people in a remote village in Kwara State. And finally, the Wildlife Commission in the U.S. state of Florida says it's managed to cull more than 5,000 invasive iguanas during a recent spell of unusually cold weather. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out now what's happening in the world of sports, and Fikile Lingwati is about to tell us.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
We bet off with cricket news. Proteas specialist consultant Albi Mokel says the wickets in India will be tough for bowlers during the upcoming T20 World Cup, offering little to no bounds. After the team's 30-run defeat to co-host India at the D.Y. Patel Sports Academy, Mokel noted that South Africa used 8 bowlers, with Marco Jansen, Corbin Bosch, Henrik Nortje and Gwena Mapaga each taking a wicket. Despite the loss, he says the team is pleased with some of the strategies they tested.
I think we saw tonight, and also the series South Africa played in India a couple of weeks ago and New Zealand now, that it's a brutal environment as a bowler to come out and do your thing. There's not a lot of bounce in the wickets. It's really true low bounce, skiddy with a lot of dew in the evening. So as a bowler, you've got your work cut out for you. We tried a few things tonight, which we were happy about. Yeah, but I think it's back to the drawing board for us.
On to football news. Former Banyana Manyana player Rhoda Mulaudzi says the women's national football team will most likely add the 8th COSAFA Women's Championship title to their trophy cabinet. South African senior women's football team has been drawn with Malawi, Lesotho and Angola in Group A of the 2025 Hollywood Bets COSAFA Women's Championship. Limpopo's capital, Polokwane in South Africa, will host the first COSAFA tournament for the first time since 2018. The tournament kicks off on the 18th of February. Mulaudzi says Banyana Banyana stands a good chance of lifting the title.
I see the 8th title coming because I also remember us Banyana winning it. It's also a motivation for them going to AFCON. And also I feel like the draw, it's good for them because going to AFCON would be nice to have a resistant match that's going to give you resistant to see how far are you in terms of preparation.
A Limpopo sports journalist, Letabo Khanyago, believes Group A games will be tough for all teams.
For me to have called it the group of death is because I look at the quality of the teams that are in the group. South Africa being record champions 7 times, Malawi, who are frequenting in the knockout stages and won it for the first time 2 years ago in 2023. Angola have also won it once when they hosted, and then Lesotho, who have never gotten out of a group, So you look at all of these teams, and then you also look at the fact that Banyana are off to the Women's Africa Cup of Nations. So are the Scorchers of Malawi as well, and these are some of the strong teams that have been coming up in recent years.
On to athletics. Records tumbled once again at the Czech Indoor Gala in Ostrava as the World Athletics Indoor Tour Gold Meeting delivered standout performances. Belgium's Eliud Christian and Hungary's Attila Molnar both returned to revise their meeting records in the 800-meter and 400-meter respectively, a year after breaking long-standing marks at the same event. Ethiopia's Becky Hailom produced the performance of the night in the women's 1,500-meter, clocking a world-leading and meeting record of 4 minutes, 00.62 seconds to edge compatriot Sharon Bay's 4 pending ratification would lower the official world under-20 short track record. The women's 800-meter also went Ethiopia's way, with world indoor silver medalist Nigist Getachew dominating from the start to win, ahead of Slovakia's Gabriela Gajanova's. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figure Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Okay, 8:35 Central African time, 25 minutes to go to the end of this program. Asanda, you're going to have an interesting conversation coming up shortly. Who are you talking to?
We're going to Egypt. We're talking to Human Rights Watch Middle East and North Africa researcher about their latest World Report 2026 that shows that Egyptian authorities systemically restricted basic reforms. So they're looking at some of the human rights atrocities that have happened there, but also things like jailed journalists and activists and the civic space being curtailed, and also economic hardships and falling public spending on education and healthcare, as well as rising poverty. We'll find out more.
All right,
in
that's
just a bit.
Yeah, fascinating listen that's going to be for sure.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
It's time for your business news, and this is the last update on Rise and Shine with Tabiso Lihuko.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. The United States is proposing a critical minerals trading bloc among allied countries in a move largely viewed as seeking to counter China. The plan was unveiled at a US-hosted ministerial summit in Washington, D.C. on critical minerals with representatives of more than 50 countries in attendance, South Africa not among them. The move comes after President Donald Trump announced the launch of a critical minerals strategic stockpile named Project Vault earlier this week. Backed by some $12 billion in seed funding, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told the summit that they intended to build an ironclad network of new industrial supply chains to span the entire nation.
Our goal here, and the reason why we're doing this conference, is to align trade policy, development finance, and diplomatic engagement towards a shared strategic objective. And that objective is very simple: diversifying global supply in the critical minerals market while strengthening the partner countries who help all of us in this shared effort.
The South African Chamber of Commerce in the US says the one-year extension of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, will help to restore business confidence. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pak Sitau has confirmed that South Africa remains a beneficiary of AGOA, which provides duty-free access to the US market for its automotive, agriculture and manufactured goods. There was anxiety among exporters following AGOA's expiration in September last year. It's now been extended to the 31st of December this year. The Chamber's chairperson, Neil Diamond, however, says they have some concerns.
As business, we are concerned about the relationship and the ongoing tensions. We still do not have an ambassador in the United States. And as business, we'll be sending a delegation next month to meet with Minister Ronald Lamola to raise our concerns with the minister. We are very happy with the work that Minister Pak Sitau have done, but we are concerned that the overall political relationship may have long-term economic ramifications.
Nigeria's NPC is in talks with a Chinese company over one of the state-owned oil firm's refineries. NPC Chief Executive Bayo Ojulari says that the company was seeking experienced operators as equity partners to revive its 4 refineries after years of losses and underperformance. He says an internal review carried out shortly after assuming his role last April showed the refineries were running at huge losses with high operating costs and heavy spending on contractors, while processing volumes remained low. Kenya's private sector activity grew, but at a slower pace in January, hurt by slower expansions of the construction and wholesale and retail sectors. The Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchases Managers Index fell to 51.9% in January from 53.7% in December. Readings above 50.0 indicate growth in business activity, while those below that signal contraction. In comments accompanying the survey, Stanbic Bank says sectoral differences were marked with the sales growth most often recorded among manufacturing firms. The U.S. workplace regulator is investigating the sportwear manufacturer Nike over allegations that it treated white employees less favorably. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has taken the matter to court after Nike failed to provide all the company records on layoffs and the use of race and ethnicity data. Nike has described the court action as a surprising and unusual escalation. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has the details.
The agency is also examining a number of internal programs it says may have restricted mentoring or career development on the basis of race. Nike responded, calling the court action a surprising and unusual escalation. The company said it takes the matter seriously, had already provided thousands of pages of information, and will continue to cooperate with the agency.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 376, Botswana 13.19, Kenya 128 shilling 9, and Zambia 19 kwacha 50. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there 5 roll 24, Russia 76 rubles 57, India 90 rupees 392, China 6 yuan 93, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 15 rand 99 cents. 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Gold is trading at $4,884 and platinum $2,070 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $67.98 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabiso Lohoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app. Growing with Africa for 60 years. Channel Africa celebrates 2026 with the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Monday saw the reopening of the Rafah crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt following last year's ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel. Despite this, the crossing has faced a myriad of challenges while also revealing of scars of those who were affected. This comes after the crossing reopened 2 years after the border had been closed due to the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Bonolo Maribe compiled this report.
The Rafah crossing, Gaza's sole route in and out for its 2 million plus residents, has been shut for most of the war. Few Palestinians were allowed back from Egypt, including 56-year-old Huda Abu Abed, who spent a year there for medical treatment. She recounted her harrowing return.
The army took me, blindfolded me, tied my hands. They took us somewhere and then they removed the blindfold from my eyes. He said, "Do you know where you are?" I said, "How would I know? Do you think I know where you have put me? What have I done for you to treat me like this?" He said, "Be quiet." So I was quiet.
Abu Abed also detailed further restrictions at the crossing.
The Palestinian Authority does not do anything at the crossing, nothing, except pulling things out of bags. They didn't leave anything with us. No medicine, no child's toys which we brought for our children, no phone, nothing. The tablet for the children, they took it. They didn't leave anything with us.
Challenges persist after patient evacuations halted on Wednesday at Rafah. Palestinian Red Crescent spokesperson Raid Al-Nims hopes that more people can be evacuated in the coming days.
We were at the utmost preparedness to evacuate the third batch of the ill and wounded from the headquarters of the Medical Rehabilitation Hospital for the Red Crescent in Khan Yunis. But unfortunately, we were informed of the postponement of this batch. Therefore, we are waiting for tomorrow to evacuate a third batch once again.
Since the reopening, at least 40 people have crossed from Egypt to Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military has denied that its forces mistreated returnees. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
Greg Ramego, Deloitte Africa's Government and Public Services lead, says that South Africa's hosting of the G20 accelerated some of the economic reforms needed that drive the country's economic growth. Ramego, who's part of a panel at Deloitte's pre-national budget roundtable hosted at Deloitte's offices in Midrand, north of Johannesburg, the country's finance minister Enoch Godongwana is set to deliver his budget speech later this month. Tutongo Beni compiled this report.
There are many expectations from South Africans, including businesses, on what reforms or directions Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will take later this month when he delivers his budget speech on the 25th. Godongwana's speech comes as the Southern African nation has enjoyed economic growth last year, not seen in many years due to the power crisis that led to many businesses closing shop and investors losing interest. Ahead of the speech, Deloitte hosted a pre-national budget roundtable at its offices in Midrand, north of Johannesburg. Joining the panel was Deloitte Southern Africa chief economist Hannah Murray, who says while last year there was a lot of uncertainty, now there's momentum as the economy has grown above the 1% threshold, with a lot of reforms needed to get the economy.
I think the year prior to that, we were still growing below 1%. The expectation for last year, the GDP numbers aren't out yet, right, is about 1.3%. So that above 1% has potentially come through. But I mean, is it the new normal or not? I think a couple of things to look at. To really boost our economy above or closer to 3%. And I mean, if we look at forecast agencies, the likes of the IMF and other agencies, even the National Treasury's numbers, we'll be seeing that real GDP growth in the medium term, the next 3, 4, 5 years, is probably going to reach about 2%, right? And this is largely driven by some of the cyclical factors that we're seeing in the global economy, also in our economy, linked to, for example, interest rates, inflation, commodity prices, etc. But certainly also the structural transformation that we're seeing. But I think by its very nature, the challenge is that structural reforms and those things that have held us back in the past take time, to implement. I think what we've seen with Operation Vulindlela in particular is that we have momentum. And I think that's what's quite important. I think we were talking about structural constraints to growth 15 years ago. It was very difficult to really see that political will and that commitment. And I think with OV Phase 1 and OV Phase 2, and it, sitting in the presidency, I think there's really a lot that has been done, particularly in the electricity market, as we know, and so many reforms still taking place there.
Greg Ramego, Deloitte Africa Government and Public Service lead, also agrees with Murray, saying he's optimistic from an economic perspective as South Africa's hosting of the G20 last year accelerated some of the reforms, while he expects less fights from the current Government of National Unity ahead of the budget in comparison to last year.
I share in the optimism. I think some of what we heard from Hannah now fuels this optimism. Of course, some of it, if you look at last year, I think some of what propelled and accelerated the key initiatives was the fact that we were hosting as G20 presidency. So some of the structural reforms that we saw be accelerated might have been informed by the fact that there was a task at hand. And the GNU, as much as it started wobbly with this issue around the budget 2025, that was withdrawn and so on. They had to find each other. Now, I think that indeed they have found each other. I think the South African challenge is that of economic growth so that we create jobs and that we impact positively people's lives. I think the GNU is sort of aligned with that. And I think by and large, the reforms that they've been busy with over the last, let's say, since the beginning of this administration are probably also very much going to help us with that economic growth. And some of it Hannah spoke about, the reforms in the fiscal strategy and so on, the fact that there's alignment on the inflation.
Looking ahead on possible tax increases, Associate Director for Tax at Deloitte, Mamohla Mohlola, says an increase in value-added tax or VAT is off the table and doesn't expect an increase in corporate tax.
Is off the table, as you mentioned, simply because when it was introduced a few years ago, when it was increased a few years ago, there were plans to make a lot of money out of it. But I don't think the budgeted increase at the time actually materialized. I don't think they'll have new taxes or increase. I don't anticipate that they'll have high taxes from a corporate tax increase, but I do believe they'll continue to make sure that probably around employee taxes or individual taxes, even there, I do anticipate that they might have inflationary increases to make sure that, but I don't anticipate, as you said, we're already overtaxed. I don't anticipate us having a lot of increases there.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
Right. An interesting fact. Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent on the planet, with more than 2,000 languages spoken across its countries. That's roughly 1/3 of all the languages spoken on the planet are spoken in Africa. Did you know that, Asanda, Beda?
Oh, I didn't know that. And then what happened?
I don't know. I wonder, how do you say cough in 2,000 languages?
Okay, let's take a break.
Channel Africa 1060. 6 decades of stories, voices, and vision.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
A situação do ativista angolano Serrote José de Oliveira, preso desde julho, tem gerado grande preocupação internacional. Conhecido como General Nila e presidente do movimento União Nacional para a Total Revolução de Angola, Serrote iniciou uma greve de fome em protesto contra a sua prisão, que considera arbitrária. De acordo com a Amnistia Internacional, o estado de saúde do ativista está a deteriorar-se rapidamente devido à falta de acesso a cuidados médicos adequados. Para discutir o impacto deste caso e o estado da liberdade política em Angola, vamos conversar com Dito Dale, ativista e defensor dos direitos humanos.
Nós estamos diante de uma clara estratégia de aniquilar os jovens, porque quando uma pessoa está doente, deve ser assistida. Ao não proporcionar esses cuidados médicos, o que é que o regime quer? Não quer que esse jovem saia livre e com vida da prisão, quer matá-lo.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Good morning starts here. Rise and shine on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Meditative.
After Rise and Shine on Channel Africa, we have On the Move. That's a show hosted by Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. Benjamin joining us this 5 to Friday to tell us what to expect. How are you?
Good, guys. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. Today we're going to be speaking about something that is alarming for me. There's a lot of online culture that, young children are participating in, like online gaming. But through football culture games and through peer WhatsApp groups, children as young as 10 to 12 are being introduced to betting, often without adults noticing. So we're going to be speaking about this online betting by children. And how do we sort this out? And how do parents actually
What are they
pick it
betting
up?
on, these kids, in the first place?
Yeah,
The
nowadays.
same things that adults bet on.
Yeah, probably.
Oh my goodness, no.
But the betting is so sophisticated. Now you can bet on 10 minutes of a game, not even the whole match anymore. You don't even need to bet on the result. You can bet on things like who's going to be the first footballer to be booked in this match. And of course, this then starts to
attract these young
games,
kids. Yeah.
And it's addictive. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Actually, gambling is an addictive practice.
All right, so we'll be speaking to Ladipo Akolade, founder of Gamble Pause Initiative Africa, which is a Nigeria-based organization that focuses on preventing gambling-related harm and promoting responsible gambling.
Yeah, we're already saying adults shouldn't do it, so why would children be doing it? There's always so many warnings for us, as you say, it's an addictive
The
sport.
thing is, we give them these mobile phones and we have no clue what they're getting up to. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why New Zealand banned these teenagers.
Well, they tried to ban it because all it does is it goes underground. That's it.
Yeah. That's coming up on The Move.
Africa's story shines at 60. Channel Africa.
The African perspective.
So, day 2 of the IBT Presidential Summit has shifted the focus from policy vision to practical implementation, with discussions centered on how innovative building technologies can be supported and funded at scale. Financial institutions, development financiers, and government entities are engaging on the risks, the opportunities, and funding models that are needed to move IBTs beyond pilot projects. Well, our reporter Lebohang Mabange has more.
As South Africa looks to accelerate the rollout of innovative building technologies, access to funding and investor confidence remain critical. On day 2 of the summit, financiers outlined what is needed to unlock investment and move IBTs from concept to delivery. Zandile Sibiya from the Banking Association South Africa says commercial banks are ready to invest, but structural challenges must still be addressed.
I can safely say here that the member banks are very keen to invest in IBTs, but obviously we note that there are systematic challenges in the sector that need to be addressed. Hence, we're here. And we're here to coordinate and work very closely with yourselves to find solutions for improving this market. I think we've been in the piloting stage for a while now, so we need to start getting, our hands dirty, implementing and actually putting everything in place.
Development finance institutions say funding decisions are guided by both traditional lending criteria and the unique risks associated with new technologies. Tsolofelo Ramotsehwa from the National Housing Finance Corporation outlined how IBT projects are assessed.
We're looking at character, which of course we gauge the reliability and trustworthiness of the projects and the systems that we are financing. We look at the capital. Is the business well capitalized? Or if it is an SPV model, are there sufficient cash flows? We look at the capacity. Is there growth potential? And is there ability to be able to meet the loan repayments? We look at collateral, which is a form of insurance for the lender ourselves. And lastly, we look at conditions, economic and industry conditions, etc.
Ramotsehwa says while IBTs present new risks, there are clear funding mechanisms that can help reduce uncertainty for lenders.
We will always hear when we are dealing with new technologies, risks related to high upfront capital costs for IBTs. And the recommendation there is that as a mitigant, we need to do bulk procurement of IBT units to reduce per unit costs through scale, and it lowers initial capex hurdles without compromising long-term affordability. Another risk that is always highlighted with new technologies is the perceived technology risk, because the technology is not well known. The mitigant for that, of course, becomes blended capital structures with first loss facilities.
The Infrastructure Fund says blended finance will play a central role in scaling up IBT implementation across the country. Dr. Misaveni Ngobeni is the Managing Director of the Infrastructure Fund.
Suffice to indicate that the IF is a blended finance platform ready to do business. We want to partner with the department to be able to ensure that the IBT intervention works better. The Infrastructure Fund is open for business, and we are willing to support the sector to reach its intended objectives.
Day 2 discussions highlight that while innovation is critical, funding structures, risk mitigation, and collaboration between government and financiers will determine whether IBTs are implemented at scale. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And that's how we come to the end of Rise and Shine. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye from us. We'll join you tomorrow, 6 a.m.
And Shine, on the move.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
All right, it's 9 o'clock, right on the spot. It's time for us to quickly